Good afternoon. Welcome to Webinar Wednesday. We are excited to have over 300 registered attendees for today's webinar, which is eligible for 1 credit from the ACI. Let's get started by giving one lucky attendee a TechNation t-shirt for answering this trivia question. This week's sponsor, Nuvolo, is headquartered in New Jersey. Name the music legends that also hails from this state and starred in The Bodyguard. Answer now using the questions feature on your dashboard. While you're answering, I want to invite everyone to save the date for the MD Expo Spring Conference, which takes place on April the 4th to the 6th, 2018, which will bring HTM professionals from across the nation to Nashville, Tennessee, for 3 days of learning, networking, and the latest advances in technology, products, and services. Details can be found at mdexposhow.com/Nashville. Okay, let's see who our winner is today, and it is Brandy Tellis. Congratulations, you win one of our lovely TechNation t-shirts. The correct answer was Whitney Houston. Webinar Wednesday would like to thank our sponsor, Nuvolo. Nuvolo is a modern, cloud-based EAM platform that meets the highest standards for ease of use, performance, and online and offline mobility capability for managing clinical equipment for healthcare providers. Visit nuvolo.com for more information. Our presenter today is Ben Pearson, Senior Director of Solution Consulting at Nuvolo. Ben, you may begin whenever you are ready.
Sounds great, and thank you. Thank you all for joining today. And what I'd like to start with is kind of going through at a high level what our agenda is and what we're going to cover as part of this session today. Where we're going to start is really looking at the first area, which is the challenge with spreadsheets. And what we see in a lot of healthcare organizations that I'm speaking with and others is the challenge of pulling data out of traditional CMMS or computerized maintenance management systems and moving that data into spreadsheets to ultimately make business decisions. We're going to talk about some of the challenges around that. And then the second area is really now how do we actually move to a more real-time reporting model as it relates to your healthcare technology management organization, and what are the benefits associated with that? How does that drive improvements to your business by having real-time access to the data as it relates to things around operations, financials, along with compliance? Well, then we're going to go into an actual demonstration of some of our key reports that a lot of healthcare technology management teams need to run their operations. And we'll show those live as part of the demonstration that we'll do in that part of the session. And then we'll wrap up with really diving into, now how do you ensure accurate data? And we're actually going to show our mobility solution, which enables our customers to work in an online or offline fashion to capture the key data at point of service, so that now you're gaining those insights in real time that ultimately your reporting can take advantage of and leverage to know exactly how your operations are running. With that, let's go ahead and talk about the first area, which is the current state of HTM reporting. And what we're going to do here is I want to start off by opening a poll up, and I want to find out from the folks that are on the call, how many of you all are leveraging spreadsheets today with your CMMS data to make decisions, whether that be capital planning decisions, whether that be financial or business decisions, whether that be your operations decisions or compliance decisions. So let's go ahead and open that poll up and see of the folks that are on the call, how many are dealing with some of those spreadsheets today. I'll wait just a minute for the folks on the call to respond, and then we'll have the poll results here in just a minute. Okay, let's go ahead and let's take a look at the results that have come in, and let's see how this looks across the portfolio of folks that are on.
Okay, Ben, it looks like we have 82% that say yes and 18% that say no.
Yeah, great. So that's what I was assuming, somewhere around there, and that's pretty typical, right? So over 80% are you leveraging spreadsheets, and most of the hospitals that we're speaking with, I spoke with about 100 hospitals just in the last 12 months. The majority of them are operating out of spreadsheets just to make business decisions of some sort around how their operations are running around healthcare technology or biomed or clinical. So let's go ahead and talk now about some of the challenges with that. So if we look at some of the things that I'm hearing in the industry and across hospitals, things that they're saying is, when it comes to spreadsheets and when it comes to pulling data out of my existing CMMS system, it's time consuming. So if the Joint Commission needs data and I have to pull a report together to prove compliance, or the DNV needs information, right? It takes me a lot of time and energy to actually get that data out of my systems, analyze it to decide, am I compliant or not? So time-consuming challenges and ultimately financial impacts to that, because I have to pull resources to ultimately put that data together into a consumable report or information to be able to leverage that to make my business decisions. The second is it's prone to human error. As soon as you have people involved in exporting data, analyzing the data, sorting and filtering the data, now all of a sudden you're introducing human error into the factor of the results of that information. And the last is really around collaboration. When I say collaboration, it's really about the sharing of that information. And we'll talk a little bit more about that here in a second, but think about sharing things like operational data, or maybe I want to share with my C-level executives more information around my finances, or I want to share with the board how I'm managing my compliance, right? So these are areas that we think about when we think about some of those kind of operational challenges when you think about dealing with working with spreadsheets. So now when we think about engaging with the C-suite, which really ties into that last bullet point, the key for this is, how do I report in a clear and concise manner, ultimately up to my leadership, around how does my operations as it relates to healthcare technology, how is it running, right? How am I doing as it relates to operations? Am I completing work on time or not? Do I have the right number of clinical technicians in my organization or not? How am I doing as it relates to my finances? You think about the cost associated with medical devices. On average, it's the third largest expense within a healthcare organization. So how am I making sure that I'm using those funds appropriately and most efficiently within a hospital or hospital system? Driving things like visual reports, real-time reports up to your C-level suite can help drive that additional visibility into how you run your business. And that's where reporting really plays a huge role. The next topic I want to dive into a little bit is around the 3 key areas that AAMI publishes around their levels of the HTM programs and what different levels do HTM programs operate under. The first level is the fundamental basic level of the HTM program. And that's typically your basic level of managing your clinical assets. And the second is moving to an established model. The last is the advanced level. And when you think about moving to an advanced HTM program level, that's where we want to see our healthcare systems operating under, which when we think about reporting analytics, that plays a pivotal and critical role in getting there. And if you look at kind of some of our key points over on the left, you think about things like, how is HTM tracking and managing all HTM related costs? And those costs are things like my service or maintenance or warranty contracts, or it's my parts, my labor, my travel, right? My asset costs, my ongoing costs related to running my business, my resources, etc. And then also looking at things like productivity measurement. How am I measuring productivity of my HTM teams? Do I have enough resources or not? Do I need to load level my work across various sites, locations, or my teams of technicians? What about looking at extensive analytics? How am I trending as it relates to my performance related to either availability of my medical devices or as it relates to the performance of my planned maintenance completion or compliance reports? Also being able to handle things like integrations. So tying into integration systems or technology systems like your real-time location services or RFID systems in a hospital to drive automation around where are my medical devices located, or tie into things like your ERP or financial system to automate things like purchase orders, parts ordering, service ordering, so that now you can automate and have end-to-end traceability and tracking as you're purchasing these equipment and bringing them back into the hospital and understanding that full life cycle. The last 2 areas are covering really things like reliability measures. So being able to track reliability of your assets, so tracking things like uptime, downtime, the total cost of ownership of your assets over their lifetime, And lastly, looking at things like cost of service ratios, understanding the cost that's going into your medical devices over the lifetime and comparing that against what you're paying for against the device. Lastly is enabling things like self-service, so that now nurses and doctors have a single way through self-service to engage with the clinical or HTM teams within the organization. So how real-time reporting helps? And this is what we're going to now move into as we actually dive into some of the reports that we have within the system out of the box. And I'm actually going to go into a live demonstration of that next. But you think about being able to actually see in real time. Historically, as we're talking about exporting to spreadsheets, as soon as that data is exported, it's now stale, right? It's no longer active in real time. Or you're looking at it more as you're running these reports in batch mode. What I want to show you today is actually reporting and analytics as part of our native Nuvolo platform that is truly real time. So as technicians are updating parts and labor, travel, as they're closing work orders, as they're completing PMs, being able to see all of that data in real time is incredibly important as you think about how you're running your operations. So at this point, let's actually jump out of the slide deck for a moment. And let's actually take a look at some of our key reports. And this is just a subset. We have over 100 out-of-the-box clinical reports as part of our solution. So these are just a few examples. And where we're going to start here is we're going to talk first about operations, and then we're going to move into finance, and the third area is going to be compliance. So those are typically, when we think about reports, that's typically where we see the three main areas. And obviously within compliance, that's how we're dealing with things like Joint Commission audits. That's how we're involved with things like environment of care reports. So we'll touch more on that as we get into that particular area. Let's start with operations. So as we look at the operations reports, for example, you'll notice here, all of my reports, again, are real time. So I can actually drill into any one of my reports. I'll show an example of that in a minute, where this is all truly real-time data. So if I want to know who's working on what and what's my workload, I can see some of that data right here. So the first report is looking at, for example, all my technicians and the work that they're performing. And it looks like we've got a couple folks I need to add some additional workload to because there appears they're underperforming within my organization. I can also see work across all my various locations and facilities. So site by site, I can see what's driving the work. So you look at the load of the work is driven by this particular location in Dallas. Now let's actually scroll down for a moment and look at utilization reports. And how am I doing as it relates to my resource loading? So you can see here, I'm actually tracking resource by resource, date by date. How much time are they spending on their work? And I could actually understand now if I'm underutilizing my technicians or overutilizing my technicians. So this is another key report when we think about resource utilization across my technicians in my organization, date by date, month by month, quarter by quarter, which can help me drive making decisions around, again, spreading out work or potentially hiring additional techs to cover the additional workload. How about corrective hours? Break fix work that's happening. I want to understand that, but I also want to understand what assets are actually driving that work. So I can see that it looks like this GE medical device is the bulk of the work that's been coming in recently around my corrective work. So this is over the course of this quarter, we're seeing the majority is coming on this particular device, which could mean maybe I have a problem with the way the planned maintenance is being done against this. Maybe I have a faulty system that needs to be replaced. But I have the data now to see where's those break fix work and what assets are driving that particular set of work. Let's look at planned maintenance now. Let's take a peek at how that actual operational data is coming in. So here I have my yearly estimated planned maintenance hours by facility. So I can actually see by facility what a total amount of work do I need to plan for, and then going back to the resource plans, do I have enough people to support that amount of work? So here you can see a simple bar chart that shows that particular set of data. The next area is now I can also see the monthly view. So maybe I want to get more granular around this coming month. What actual work do I have? And maybe I need a load level. Looks like I do. So we have a lot of work coming up here this next week that we'll need to address. The next couple of charts is around availability of my asset. So here I have total downtime by my asset tag. We automate the downtime tracking of your medical devices. So as work's performed against assets, we know, is this work related to a planned maintenance or a break fix type of an environment? If it's break fix, automate tracking of that medical device so that now I know how reliable is the device, and which the ones that are going down the most I'm going to look into and maybe look and make a business decision around that and figure out what's happening. Is it the service provider that I need to work with to address some of these downtime issues, right? Or is it the way we're doing the planned maintenance or the servicing of that device? What about past due or incomplete work by my technicians? Who has the most past due work that needs to be addressed? So you can actually see that in real time. I can even drill in to see, looks like Peter has the most here. I can actually click into this bar in real time. Here's all the work orders that Peter has assigned to him that need to get addressed as it relates to the backlog within the system. So let's go back now. In the last couple reports I'll touch on, maybe I want to see inventory data around who owns what data. So if you do any sort of chargebacks or showbacks, department by department, we see that quite often, where work and from an HTM or clinical perspective is actually needing to be billed back or charged back to a particular department. We have the data around that because I now know the medical devices that are tied to what departments, so that now when we do work against those devices, that automation of that chargeback can be done because we have a department tie or cost center or charge code associated with that. And the last one is PMs with equipment that's overdue. So this is thinking about devices that are past due for their PMs and who owns those past due PMs. So from an operations perspective, these are just a few examples. Obviously we have many, many more, but I just want to show a few examples of quick data. And again, these are, like I said, all real-time reports that you can drill into. The next one is finance I want to show. So if we go into our financial reports, this is really looking at all the various spend within the organization. And the first set of reports I'm going to talk to is parts management. So if you're tracking parts and you're replacing parts on your medical devices, or you have stock rooms or locations that you're tracking inventory, as those parts are used on work orders, we're also tracking the costs associated with those parts. So now I can actually see asset by asset in this report, where are my parts being used? Looks like this particular device is using around, looks like $23,000 of parts so far this quarter. So I may want to look into that. What's causing all those parts replacements on that device, or the costs associated with the parts on that device? I can also see my total spend on parts this quarter. So I could also see where am I spending that money on parts, and why do we have a spike come in early February? Do we make a bulk purchase of parts? But now I can track those spends of parts that are being used. How about equipment changes? So as new assets are brought into the hospital or locations, where are we adding or removing devices? So this is adding or removes of active equipment by year. So this is year over year. We can see equipment that's being brought in and what locations are bringing these assets in. So it looks like, again, the Dallas hospital is driving most of these. The San Jose locations has a number of additional assets. And again, live data. So I can drill in and see exactly the assets that were brought in this year and what's the state of those devices. So now I'm looking at my inventory data, right? So we'll look at a few other examples here within finance. We've got a couple others, and then we'll move on to compliance. What about contracts data? So within the system, we can allow our customers to track all of their contract information. So in this case, I have 3 example contracts, one with GE, one with Medtronic, one with Baxter. And these are either maintenance contracts, service contracts, warranty contracts. And then what we're trying to do here with our contracts module is enable hospitals to actually determine, here's the assets that fall under the contracts, here are the entitlements that I'm entitled to, whether it be parts, whether it be services, whether it be a certain amount of planned maintenance or preventive maintenance, all of those coverage areas, so that now when that actual work is performed against those devices by that service provider, you actually can track the costs associated with that and the return on investment, which is ultimately the value you get out of that capability. Is now you can make business decisions around, is this contract worth what I paid for it or not? Do I need to renegotiate this contract, or do I need to move this work potentially back in-house? So our contracts module gives you that data, and again, from a reporting perspective, I can see in real time, how's the return on investment of a given contract? What about capital planning, capital forecasting? Right, so maybe I want to look at planning my asset replacement, and typically we're seeing hospitals looking at 3 key areas when it comes to capital forecasting and capital planning, right? So looking at, when do I need to replace my medical devices up in the future? It could be based on depreciation schedules. It could be based on a manufacturer's recommended end of life date. It could also be based on that cost of service ratio. So making a repair versus replace decision can also play into this forecasting decision process. And at this point, let's go ahead and jump over to compliance. There's a couple other reports there, but I'm going to move now to the compliance reports and talk about some of the other areas when we think about reporting. So what about devices that are falling under an alternative equipment maintenance cycle? So from a reporting perspective, we can see that. We can actually see the devices that have fallen under AEM. I could drill into those assets and understand which particular devices are on and running under an AEM program. I can also provide that data to the Joint Commission if they need to know what assets are falling under AEM and what was the qualification criteria that allowed them to fall under AEM. Looking at a couple other report types, maybe we want to track as part of the solution our incident reports, specifically due to medical equipment failure. In this case, I have one. Again, I could drill into that to see the record behind it. Same with any of these. So I can see my incident reports. I can see equipment damage and abuse reports, operator errors, major medical failures that cause an issue. So key quick data points that I may want to watch as it relates to my compliance. The last two I'll talk to is really now around my PM completion and my PM compliance. So this is looking at a monthly view where I can see now all of my complete PMs, but I can also measure how many are open, but maybe they're in use and I couldn't, for example, I couldn't get access to the room or the device was unable to locate. I can also see my open PMs for this month that still haven't been completed. So I still have 10 remaining that need to be addressed. So a quick access, again, I can actually drill into that, see those 10 that are also open and available that need to get fixed and addressed by my technicians, but not just completion, right? I also want to look at overall compliance. Just because the PM was completed doesn't mean that it was completed in the timely fashion and met the compliance requirements. So now I can drill in and actually see my compliance, my non-compliant, and again, the ones that were in use, I can exclude potentially from my non-compliance because it was in use or I couldn't locate it. So those are just some quick reports, again, looking at operations, looking at finance, and looking at compliance that covers a good portion of what we see a lot of our healthcare organizations needing to run their operations. Honestly, there's lots of other reports. For example, we have customers that want to print their service history report, is a pretty common report, and there's many, many others that we could touch on, but for the sake of the demo, those are the key areas that I want to hit on today. What I'd like to go back to now is taking a look at really the next topic, which is, all those reports are great. They look good. We have data we need real time at our fingertips, but the data is only as good as how we collect the data. And if you think about how we collect data, when we just asked earlier, how many people are using spreadsheets? I've asked similarly the same question as it relates to how many technicians in the field are using a mobile device to capture at point of service the information versus how many are printing work orders, or how many are actually going out doing work and then logging what they did back on their laptop or desktop at the end or some point within their day. It's very common we're seeing within the industry that they're printing or they're using a desktop laptop as part of performing the work. Well, the challenge with that is data accuracy, right? And what I want to demonstrate next is our mobile platform that allows our customers to work both online but also offline. So there's no scenario that a technician can't log their work, can't enter their time, can't close the work order or deal with inventory and bring on new inventory. So what I will do next is let's actually go ahead and bring up my mobile interface for a second. And let's take a look at that. So you should be able to see on your screen my mobile phone. So we'll go ahead and full screen this out. All right, so let's take a look at that. So if we bring up our mobile interface for a second, you're going to notice that we have our application here, which is a native application that works on iOS, iPhones, iPads. It also works on Android phones, Android tablets. It also works on Windows, Surface, and Windows devices as well. So it gives our customers truly a native experience when it comes to doing their work. So I can have my work, my assets, my work orders on my device. You'll notice right now it's synchronizing, so it's pulling my work down locally, so that if I went into an area that didn't have connectivity, I went to a basement or I had poor Wi-Fi or cellular signal, I can keep on working. So this works in an online and offline fashion. And if I do go offline, as I do my work, it's still logging my work, my timestamps, what I did, and then as soon as I regain connectivity, it resynchronizes that back to the system. So let's go ahead and bring open a work order here. So I'll bring open my group's work here. And what I have the ability to do now is go ahead and actually use some additional capabilities like things like barcode scanning. So maybe I want to scan a barcode and find the actual tag related to that device. So let's go ahead and do that. We'll scan a barcode here. There we go. So what this did was it just went ahead and searched for that tag, and now I can actually see all the work related to that device. So here I am, I'm in a work order. It's assigned to me. I can log my notes. I can do a lot of additional things within this work order. Very simple user interface. We also have this concept of checklisting. So within checklists, you can drive electronic required steps. So you think about things like lockout tagout procedures or procedural checks, like a planned maintenance, for example, in a lot of cases, has steps that must be followed as part of the performing that PM. In most cases, hospitals are using that from a PDF file. Well, when it comes to mandating that a technician actually follow those steps within a PDF, it's hard to enforce. And imagine if for some reason that PDF or that process ever had to change. Now I have to retrain my technicians, distribute a new PDF, and hope that the technicians use the latest and greatest process. Whereas here, we can actually enable you to put those additional questions from that PDF right here, and if it ever had to change, you add the next question, and your technicians are mandatorily required to process those steps before they actually can complete their work. So again, driving automation, driving the procedures and compliance requirements as part of our mobile interface. As a technician now, I can also do things like add my cost, add my parts, my labor, my travel, all right here natively. I can pull from my parts inventory and add those costs right to my work order. I can also work with attachments. So let's say for a minute that I actually want to bring up an attachment. I could possibly add a file. I could attach a file to this. So if I wanted to attach a PDF, or if I wanted to take a picture, I can do that as well. I can even add electronic signature. So if I needed to have something physically signed off on by a nurse, a doctor, maybe a third party, I can add electronic signatures to this as well. So in this case, let's go ahead and attach a photo here. I'll go ahead and bring this up. I'll just go ahead and take a picture of my laptop for the sake of this here. There we go. We'll go ahead and snag. So there's my infusion pump. So in the cases, for example, that maybe there was a damaged device, having that ability for a technician to actually capture a photo of what actually occurred possibly could be used as part of that work order tracking natively within the system. So with that, at this point now, I could complete that work order, move on to my next, again, online, offline, at the point of service. So as I do those updates and as it's synchronizing right now back to the system, this is enabling now from a reporting perspective for me to see that information real time back within my analytics side of my view. Okay, so what I'm going to do at this point is go ahead and jump back into the presentation. So how does Nuvolo help? One thing I'd like to just bring up with the team here is, do you have an upcoming CMMS project? Are you looking to upgrade your existing CMMS? Are you looking to replace your existing CMMS? Are you looking to enhance it to align with the latest Joint Commission requirements, right? Are you looking to build out new reports and analytics? If you are, that's something to think about as we think about looking at possible solutions, and Nuvolo definitely plays a role in helping do that. So what we like to do is we do have a weekly product webinar where we walk through in detail our enterprise asset management solution, which modernizes your traditional CMMS systems. Every week we have that. Here's a link at the bottom in yellow that will point you to that particular sign-up sheet, which allows you to go ahead and walk through and see a walkthrough of the Nuvolo platform. At this point, what I'm going to do is open this up for questions and see if there's any questions from the line.
Okay, thank you, Ben. We've had a few questions. The first one is, how is all this data compiled? Is it through work orders?
That's a great question. Yeah, so the data is coming in a number of different ways. Work order data is one of the primary feeds of the data, right? So you think about things like cost of assets, right? Total cost of ownership, parts costs, labor costs, resource availability, resource productivity are all coming in via work order data. But there's other data points that we also pull in, right? Whether that be from your real-time location services around location of your medical devices, or from your ERP, related to your financials or your purchasing process around your medical devices. But yes, to answer the question, work orders is one of the primary input methods when it comes to the data.
Okay, thank you. So how do you handle service contract processing?
Sure. And if I understand the question right, service contracts, maintenance contracts, warranty contracts, as I touched on briefly there within the reports, we do have a capability out of the box for that specifically that allows our hospitals to actually track those contracts, tie those contracts to their assets within their inventory, and then also tie the entitlements. What are those assets entitled to under that contract related to that, so that now when work is performed, we can actually tie that cost back to that contract and ultimately understand how is that contract performing, if that answers the question.
Okay. Next question. What do you have for environment of care and AEM reporting?
Sure. And as you saw in the compliance report, we've got a number of reports that are specifically tied to environment of care. We also do report on AEM and what assets fall under AEM programs to allow you to respond to any sort of environment of care reporting needs that your organization may have.
Okay. How are people reporting PM completion when the device is not available, such as sent out for repair or in use on a long-term patient?
Yep, great question. So that is, as you saw in our completion and compliance report at the very end, those are those two pie charts that you would have seen on that. We have out of the box the ability to track that completion and compliance of your planned maintenance specifically. And there are categories that we track if we're unable to access the room, for example, or if we had to send the device out for repair, that allows us to exclude that as a non-compliant PM, right? So you saw that as a couple different status options that allow us to track specifically that, unable to access the room, unable to access the device, or if I sent that device out for repairs.
Do the work orders have work classification on what type of work was completed?
It sure does. Yeah, so there's a number of different classifications. You have priority classifications. You also have the type of work that's being performed. So if it's an inspection, or if it's a round that you're performing, or if it's a corrective maintenance or preventive maintenance, you have the ability to track that as part of the various categorizations that we have within the system. And additional categories can also be added through configuration, very simply, depending on, along with service levels as well. So I can actually tie service levels to the priority of the work, the location, the asset, and the asset type, but also areas like the type of work as well.
Okay. How do you handle parts contracts not itemized by asset? This would make associating with a particular asset very complicated.
Yeah, sure. So I need to ask a couple more questions on that. But the way that we typically do it in that particular question is I can entitle within our contracts module a part to a set of assets. It doesn't have to be asset by asset. So if I'm entitled to consumables, for example, and it can be that generic, so I could entitle consumables to this set of assets, and it doesn't have to be asset by asset. Or if I'm entitled to a certain amount of parts or a certain dollar amount of parts, and we have customers that are requiring that level of tracking or broadening that level of tracking of parts entitlements to your set of assets. It can be generic in terms of covering all of your assets if it's so needed to be.
Okay, I'm still waiting to get a approval of one question. Team, is there anything you would like to expand on while we're just waiting for some more questions?
Just to remind everyone again, here is that link. I just want to bring that back up on the screen so that folks that maybe missed that when I flipped past it. Here is our demonstration. So if anybody's interested in seeing the end-to-end demonstration, it's about 30-minute walkthrough. It's fairly short, but allows you to get a look at a little bit more under the hood at our enterprise asset management system and see how we use things like self-service portal for our nurses and doctors areas like the call center and how that operates, along with a little more detail around more of the management functions of the platform, right? So how do you deal with alternative equipment maintenance? How do you set up planned maintenance schedules within the system? Because we support a very broad ability around planned maintenance scheduling based on different requirements there, and many other areas. Just want to refresh everyone that this is the link to please go ahead and sign up and let us know.
Next question, how do you balance work? It's always one work order, one unit. A cath lab is not the same as an EKG. Can you track work by the ton?
Yeah, is the question, can I track work by department or group that I'm supporting? Is that the question? I'll pause for a second and allow that to be clarified.
I just want to remind attendees that we will try and get through as many questions as we can. Any we don't get time for, I will forward to Ben and his team, and he will answer within the next couple of days. But just hanging on for Ben's approval of one question.
I'll answer this. Hey, Ben, we got another question. Can this Nuvolo be used for a third-party biomed company for more than 150 facilities, or is it mainly used for hospital or in-house biomed?
Oh, good question. And that actually ties to the contracts conversation we just had. Nuvolo, some of our Nuvolo customers aren't just hospitals and healthcare systems. It's also healthcare service providers. And we have some of the largest in the world that are customers of Nuvolo that are using us to actually manage and service hospitals as well. So we actually support those types of customers in addition to the traditional hospitals and healthcare systems and organizations. Great. Any other questions? Great.
Okay. How do you get the OEM recommendation for maintenance? Is it in your system, or does the site have to contact the OEM?
Yeah, so what we do is we work with the clients. Most have that data, and if they don't, we work with them to help get that put into the system related to OEM recommended planned maintenance schedules. It's usually a joint collaboration between our implementation team and the end hospital and healthcare organization.
Right, I've just sent another question over, which I hope you will be able to answer. We have quite a few coming in, so please bear with us. Okay, right, the next question is, Ben, does Nuvolo have or is working towards collaboration with OEMs or a third party to get equipment parts lists or PM protocols loaded out of the gate?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, great question. So we do have OEMs that are actually customers of Nuvolo as well. So we have two of the largest medical device manufacturers that are actually customers of ours. We also have large services organizations as well. So to quickly answer the question, we are working with them to provide solutions, just to your point, around maintenance manuals, PM schedules, and what was the other question that was asked around parts lists? We also have a partnership with PartSource as well, which can give us that data in addition to what our OEM parts inventory lists can provide.
Okay, and another question is, does this system contain or interact with the facility's entire inventory database?
Good question. So we focus on the clinical side of our portfolio of our application set. We also have a purpose-built facilities integrated workplace management system as well to handle things like facilities, work order and asset inventory and maintenance. But it also has space and move, native AutoCAD integration. We also have sustainability, capital program and project management. So we have the full facilities portfolio as a separate set of applications that's purpose-built and designed for your facilities and broader facilities set of capabilities.
Okay, we've just got so many questions here. Okay, what CMMS applications can you move to Nuvolo from?
Sure. Yeah, well, there's a number. We're typically migrating customers from applications like TMS 4 Rivers, IBM Maximo, Metamizer, AIMS, and a large number of others.
Another question that's come in, how does the system manage purchase orders for parts and associated reporting?
Good question. So as part of, we have a separate module called purchase orders that allows us as technicians or as a purchasing team to initiate those purchase orders either from a work order or from the purchase order module itself. So if you need to purchase additional parts or services, and typically we're integrating with a ERP, Oracle, SAP, Lawson being the most common within healthcare, that we interface with, and think of our system as the purchase order request. So we're initiating that request from a work order or from our PO request system, and that's triggering that actual PO to be processed within the ERP itself. So now we can track that end-to-end life cycle of parts ordering through parts receiving, and ultimately receiving that potentially back to the work order that was requesting that particular part or service.
Okay. Do you have a list of software you can already integrate with no little development? For example, intelligent insights for RTLS?
Yes, so yeah, that's absolutely, there's a number of out-of-the-box integrations that we can do for our customers. We have integrations with RTLS systems like Centrac, Stanley AeroScout. There's call center systems we can integrate with. There's ERPs like SAP, Oracle, and Lawson. There's a very, very long list. We also have an incredibly flexible integration framework that allows us to interface via web services, which is the most common, over SOAP or REST APIs. We can also interface directly to database connections. We can also interface via flat files as the most basic form. Email integrations is even a possibility. So integrations as part of the system is incredibly powerful, and we're actually seeing a lot of automation because of that, by driving that automation and integration with the overall platform.
Okay, does Nuvolo integrate with automated medical device testing equipment?
Yes, so Nuvolo has an integration with Fluke test meters, for example. That's an integration and a partnership that Nuvolo has. So that's a fairly common integration that we're seeing across the industry.
Okay, we've got time for a couple more. Do you offer data cleanup services?
We can help during implementation of helping clean up things like asset types, models. That's a fairly common scenario that we run into. And where we're seeing that move to is asset classification systems. So we also integrate, and I did mention this earlier, with safety and recall systems like ECRI and RASMAS are two common safety and recall systems that we're natively integrating to. That's one classification method that we see hospitals moving to. So moving to UMDNS, Universal Medical Device Naming System, that ECRI provides, is one option. The second, we also have a native integration to the FDA's Unique Device Identifiers, UDI. So we already have all of the FDA's UDIs in the system as well. So you can look at things like the GMDN related to the medical device, Global Medical Device Naming Standard, as another method of classification. So typically what we're seeing is hospitals working with us to figure out where do we go as it relates to standardizing our classification of our medical devices. Can we move, for example, to the FDA UDI so that when I buy a new medical device, it shows up at my dock and it has a barcode on it for the UDI. Can I just scan that and have it auto-classify my device back to that UDI as a go-forward plan to make sure that as I bring a device in, it's auto-classified back to an industry standard? That's something that we are seeing moving to, and so that's just one example, if that helps answer that question.
Okay, one more. What would be a logical minimal size facility to go with this system?
we see hospitals of really any scope and size. I mean, typically, we're seeing anywhere from 100 beds and up. So there's really not a necessarily that. I mean, honestly, we have global healthcare organizations that are using this. Down to smaller hospital, single-site hospitals. So there's really no one size that fits all. We can support any scale and scope, and it is a global system as well, including things like language localization if required, even internationally.
Okay, right, let's see what other questions. Okay, this looks like it will probably be the last one. Can you briefly touch on the security and how the data is protected with the utilization of mobile devices?
Sure. Yeah. So mobile specifically. So the data that's actually synchronized locally to your mobile interface is allowed to be encrypted. It's a local database on the mobile interface itself. And that mobile device can be protected using systems like mobile device management systems like AirWatch, Mobile Iron, and others to actually secure that mobile application and the mobile data, and even remotely wipe that application if needed. So one, you can do encryption of the data on the mobile device, and you can also manage it using mobile device management systems.
Okay, right. I think that's all the questions we have time for, Ben. But thank you, Ben, again, and thank you again to today's sponsors, Nuvolo. One lucky attendee will win an Amazon gift card for completing the post-webinar survey. Details will appear on your screen shortly. You must complete the survey to obtain your certificate of attendance. If you do not see the survey, please email us at webinar@mdpublishing.com. For more information about our upcoming webinars, please visit our website, technation.com/webinars. We look forward to seeing you next week at a webinar. So have a great day, and thanks again, Ben.
Thank you all very much for your time today. Really appreciate it.